Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2021 Dirty Dozen List reveal. We're so thrilled that you're joining us. It's so great seeing in the chat people from all around the world, all around the United States doing incredible work. We're thrilled to have you with us. I'm Linda Nealon, the Director of Corporate and Strategic Initiatives at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, a nonpartisan nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., confronting the full spectrum of sexual abuse and exploitation and leading a movement towards dignity. We do this through research, coalition building, litigation, legislative and corporate advocacy, and by galvanizing the public through grassroots campaigns like the one we're unveiling today. The Dirty Dozen list names 12 mainstream institutions that facilitate, normalize, and even benefit from sexual exploitation: child sex abuse, rape, sexual objectification, prostitution and sex trafficking, and pornography. The Dirty Dozen list is comprised of corporations, brands, organizations, and institutions that you likely know, ones that you and I are probably using on a weekly, if not daily basis. And they exert enormous influence and power, politically, economically, socially, and culturally. And while many of them provide us with products that we love, entertainment, and ways of communicating, they're also perpetuating and enabling violence and harm. How? Through poor policies or lack of enforcement of what's on paper, through highly problematic platform designs, by providing the infrastructure for entities that are abusive and exploitative, or by simply turning a blind eye in order to protect their bottom line. And sadly, while these issues are not new, the times that we're in are truly novel. The 2021 Dirty Dozen list heavily features entities that profited from the pandemic. And in fact, eight to 10 of the 12 entities did have record revenues and saw surges in users. Some of the more predatory businesses on our list were quick to capitalize on the deepening vulnerabilities and societal chaos that COVID-19 created. Others saw their profits skyrocket as the world moved online, and they could have done much more to protect the people using their products, especially children. The FBI and Interpol at the onset of COVID were warning of increased risk that in fact became reality of predatory behavior, grooming, trafficking, and sexual abuse of children. These issues are beyond any individual family, community, school district, or nonprofit to tackle. And these entities have a social obligation to do something, especially now. And they must do so with the urgency that's appropriate to the gravity of these harms. It can seem like these institutions are utterly untouchable, unmovable, and remain unaccountable for placing profit over the public good. Even the most optimistic among us can feel daunted, questioning whether any effort, big or small, truly makes a difference. But here's the good news, that yes, we absolutely can make a difference, and we have. And it's thanks to people like you who have helped us move more than 100 policy changes. The goal of the Dirty Dozen is to put pressure on these institutions so that they change their problematic practices and proactively advance a culture of dignity. Through the Dirty Dozen list, through the tools, the actions that we provide to people like you, and then the actions that you take, we have been able to move major corporations and have several victories. Some of our favorites: Google. Just over a year ago, an anatomical search yielded pages of hardcore pornography, and innocent search terms like happy black teen resulted in images of sexual abuse and torture. Google heard from many of you, and with pressure from the cozy, they finally changed their algorithms so that now basic anatomical searches and innocent terms will more often yield pictures rather than hardcore pornography, although sadly that still does exist. But we know that if we can change Google, that has ripple effects around the entire world. United Airlines. United Airlines and other airlines were seeing an increase in pornography use on their planes, which was leading to a toxic environment for both passengers and crew, feeling unsafe, emotionally triggered, and leaving people victim to sexual harassment. We pressed on United Airlines, and again, through the Dirty Dozen list, hearing from people like you, United Airlines committed to having in-person training on how to deal with sexual harassment and in-flight pornography. TikTok, this is one of my favorites. TikTok was on the dirty list in 2020. They were known as the predator's hunting ground for their easy access of strangers to children. A few months after being placed on the Dirty Dozen list, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation and allies were able to meet with TikTok and give them recommendations for how to make their platform safer. They instituted PIN controls, created defaults for children 13 to 15, and even disabled some features like direct messaging. And recently, they put out community guidelines that we feel are among the best that we've ever seen across any industry. Now, TikTok still has a lot more to do, but this is major changes that are affecting close to 1 billion people who are using TikTok. I want to leave you with these success stories so that you could hold on to this hope and optimism that change is possible as we now present the 2021 Dirty Dozen list. These entities are hereby put on notice. My colleagues will present 6 of the targets a bit more in depth. Each presentation will be about 4 minutes long. Please put any questions that you have in the Q&A. We will have time to answer questions. Please indicate who you are and who you're with, especially if you're with the press. We are going to try to prioritize questions from the press. And if you do have to leave early, we want to be sure that you visit dirtydozenlist.com. You can learn more about each of these targets, learn about the ones that you didn't hear about, visit the proof that our research team has collected, and most importantly, learn how you can take action. Again, dirtydozenlist.com. And now I invite the Senior Vice President and Executive Director of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, Dawn Hawkins, to present Amazon.
Thank you, Lena. So this one shouldn't be a surprise for being named to the Dirty Dozen list. Amazon is the world's titan of e-commerce, logistics, data storage, and media. But they also peddle and facilitate endless amounts of sexual exploitation. Before I share more about the ways in which Amazon does this, I want to recognize some progress that they've made in the last year, though. It appears that after pressure from us here in the United States and from NGOs in the UK, Canada, and Australia, and likely because of the Creeper Act, which passed the US House in 2018 and was reintroduced in Congress in 2020, Amazon finally got the message and they removed all childlike and full-body sex dolls from their platform. Amazon also made ongoing improvements to safety and content features for Amazon Kids. And finally, they instituted parental control features for Amazon Prime Video. While I and I think all of us are quite frustrated that these improvements took so long, we do thank Amazon for these policy and platform changes. A major focus of our advocacy this year with Amazon concerns their social media platform, Twitch. Twitch is an online platform used for live streaming and is Amazon's attempt to capitalize on the booming popularity of the video game community. Twitch is mostly comprised of gamers, but it ranges in activities like watching, listening to music together, painting, or even just chatting. Twitch has tripled in size during COVID, with at least 9.2 million active users in December. The problem is that Amazon's Twitch is rife with sexual harassment, predatory grooming, and child sexual abuse. A July 2020 investigation by Wired revealed that a number of children on the platform are below the minimum legal age. There are frequent conversations between children and strangers, with strangers daring kids to do explicit acts or to share their contact information. Despite the meteoric rise in child users, Twitch has yet to develop lockable parental controls, leaving children totally unprotected. Twitch is also a dangerous place for women and girls who are regularly harassed and even assaulted by many streamers and members of the Twitch community. Last year, dozens of women came out about this trend, listing 400 users complicit in harassment, abuse, and even rape. But most of the users have been allowed to remain active on the platform, while Amazon has seemingly ignored the pleas of their female users. Twitch has the capability to develop and implement strong, industry-leading policies and practices that will protect its users from exploitation, abuse, and harassment. It's not just a matter of capability, but rather responsibility on Twitch and Amazon's part to do everything in their power to create a safe, respectful, and exploitation-free culture on both the Twitch platform and in the gaming community as a whole. Further reasons for adding Amazon to the Dirty Dozen list this year is, as a media creator, Amazon Prime Video inserts gratuitous, unnecessary nudity and simulated sex scenes into many of its original programming while providing faulty parental controls. There are still some major problems with the controls they rolled out last year. As an online retailer, Amazon is in the business of selling incest and racist-themed pornography, disembodied sex dolls, photography books, and eroticized child nudity, sex trafficking how-to manuals, and more. Nicosi researchers found that 20 to 35% of the top 100 paid titles in Amazon's 18 written pornography categories were incest themed. And many of these show up if you just type innocent searches like birthday gift for stepdaughter. Think of how many of Amazon's customers are survivors of incest. And here we have Amazon recommending these books to you with innocent searches. Amazon S3 and Amazon Web Services are also host to thousands of hardcore violent pornography and prostitution websites. Amazon is host to prostitution website OnlyFans, for example. And that leads us to another Dirty Dozen list member. For that, I welcome Dr. Stephanie Powell, Director of Law Enforcement Outreach and Survivor Services, here with us.
Hello. It is through my presentation that you will have an idea how OnlyFans operates, the risks involved, and most importantly, why it is on the Dirty Dozen list. First of all, OnlyFans is not an app, it's an actual website. And so therefore, if the creator has to promote using other platforms such as Reddit. And it's from those platforms that it drives their following over to OnlyFans. You cannot build from this site, and so therefore you cannot search by name. So they have to depend on these other platforms in order to get people over to OnlyFans to be able to view their page. However, once you publish, you have reached the point of no return. The bottom line is that it enables a person who is buying on this website to be able to contact the creator. And so as a result, the appeal of this is that it gives a more personal feeling or a more personalized approach. There's a strong indication of underage sexual exploitation. The sad part is that it's becoming normalized, and it's becoming normalized to our youth. And if it maintains its growth, it will catch up with Snapchat. There is a blurred line between the sex industry and influencers. Everyone is paid directly, and that is what makes it so popular. So popular to the fact that other platforms are looking at being able to have the same type of business model where there is direct payment. There's also a direct line to Pornhub because those people that would be drawn to Pornhub are especially drawn to OnlyFans because it gives this illusion of having a personal relationship. And that is what makes it risky because people are able to actually meet the creative. And traffickers are recruiting off of this as well. And they too will use the opportunity to meet the creator in order to make more money. Because for creators, money is the driving point. The other numerous risks are sexual exploitation. It creates a slippery slope because the creator starts to be asked to do more. Because the more you do and the more degrading things you do, the more money you make. It also targets young people for this reason of making money and making fast money. And keep in mind, you're supposed to be 18. However, there is a large presence of those that are under 18. Also, what happens is that someone can exert control over the person because you see, the more you do, the more it enables you to heighten your influencer status and in order to make money. But here's an interesting point. It feeds into the hands of traffickers because guess what? They get a 5% finder's fee. So as you know, where there's a will, there's a way. And if there's a way to make money through sexual exploitation and trafficking, it will happen. Also, it creates an atmosphere of doxing, shaming, harassment, and personal attacks on the creator. So that tells you about OnlyFans. I'd like to now hand off the baton to my colleague, Aubrey Pound, who will introduce a Dirty Dozen List member who is helping to fund the organized sexual exploitation industry, WISH. Take it away, Aubrey.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Wish, you all may be familiar with, super popular retail shopping website and app. I get ads for them all the time on my personal Facebook, but they're used by over 500 million people and they're based worldwide. So they ship to a majority of the countries in the whole world. So this is really a global corporation. However, they are one of the few mainstream corporations still working with the world's biggest sexual abusers, MindGeek and Pornhub. As many of you know, MindGeek and Pornhub have recently come under fire for hosting child sexual abuse material, depictions of actual rape and sex trafficking, and non-consensually recorded and or shared intimate videos. In a hearing on February 5th with Canadian Parliament, MindGeek's co-owner said 50% of their profits rest on advertisements, and Wish is advertising with MindGeek. So they are quite literally financially propping up the pornography industry with this partnership. Not only that, Wish was on the Dirty Dozen list last year because their profits rest on the marketing of childlike sex dolls, spy cams advertised as useful for filming women nude without permission, and misogynistic apparel. It seems like the perfect partnership when you consider the many videos of non-consensually recorded and uploaded intimate videos that are on Pornhub, and Wish selling and marketing spy cameras for filming women in various private settings. The atrocity of the combination of the themes found in pornography with these ads likely containing these products perpetuates the vicious cycle of sexual abuse and exploitation. What does it lead to when hardcore pornography videos sexualizing minors are shown with retail advertisements for childlike sex dolls by their side? Or when non-consensually filmed pornography is shown next to an ad selling spy cams? The impact of Wish products being advertised right next to porn's abusive themes is perpetuating a culture that believes it's okay to sexually abuse or exploit someone, and Wish can make it happen for dirt cheap. I think that for that reason, Wish deserves to be on the Dirty Dozen list this year. They are shopping made exploitative, and we are calling on them to prioritize people over profits. Now, I would like to turn it over to my colleague Haley McNamara, Vice President and Director of the International Center on Sexual Exploitation, who will introduce our Dirty Dozen list member who is a repeat offender.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. Today, I am going to be sharing someone who's not actually a formal Dirty Dozen list member, but actually a Watchlist member. So we have a Watchlist, which has a place for 3 entities who are making progress, but who we still want to wait and see how they enact the policy improvements in practice. So we're keeping the pressure on. We have 3 members on our watch list this year: Visa, TikTok, and Snapchat. And I'll explain a little bit more about Snapchat. Cases involving child sexual abuse materials, non-consensually shared pornography, and sextortion have skyrocketed in the wake of lockdowns and increased time online because of COVID-19. And one app that has been particularly attractive to sexual exploiters is Snapchat. In fact, just last week, a 20-year-old man pled guilty in a sextortion case where he targeted a 14-year-old girl on Snapchat, got her to send a sexually explicit photo of herself, and then threatened to send those photos to the girl's friends and family unless she sent him more. The girl initially refused to get to exchange any more with him, and the man started sending the photos to one of the girl's classmates. And so, in absolute fear that he would further expose her, the girl sent him more images. By the time that police had investigated this man, he had similarly targeted at least 100 other women on Snapchat. Snapchat is consistently ranked as one of the most popular social media apps among teens, and so it has a really serious social obligation to prioritize creating a safe environment for youth, which it isn't. We're thankful over the years and through meeting with us at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation that they have made important improvements, which is why Snapchat is not on the formal Dirty Dozen list, but instead on the watch list. Some of those improvements have included improved in-app reporting options, allowing Discover publishers to age-gate content, discontinuing Snapcash, which we warned was prominently being used for prostitution and commercialized pornography. Of course, there still are a rampant number of accounts promoting pornography on the app. And unfortunately, there's still so much more that Snapchat needs to do, which is why they're remaining on our watch list. For example, parental controls right now, they're more like suggestions. They aren't pin protected so that the minors can't go back and change the parental controls. On accounts for 13-year-olds, we're still finding hypersexualized stories that promote risky sexual behavior in the Discover section of the app. Their app rating in both the Apple and Google Play stores is still too low. It does not accurately reflect the risks on Snapchat. It's 12 plus on Apple, and more. But one last thing that I'll mention, which is to me a disturbing picture of the way Snapchat has failed to prioritize online safety, is that the Snapchat Parents Guide and Community Guidelines, which were only recently released, included no meaningful information about the extensive risks on Snapchat regarding harmful behavior like sextortion, sexting, and grooming. This is a gross oversight, and I fear that it may be emblematic of Snapchat's larger cultural carelessness. Snapchat's response is insufficient in scope and urgency given the immense harm on its platform. Just recently, a Business Insider article shared the stories of young people who are on Snapchat groomed to send sexually explicit images, which were then leveraged to blackmail them into further abuse. These experiences create world-shattering trauma for survivors. Snapchat has been informed of this systemic problem, and yet they do not in turn warn parents or caregivers through their app ratings or through their parental guides. So we thank Snapchat for their improvements. We do believe they are working to resolve some of these problems, but we keep them on the watch list until we see those solutions surface. You can learn more and take action at endsexualexploitation.org/Snapchat. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Jake Robison, Vice President and Director of Communications, to discuss Discord.
Hello, folks. Discord is not just for gamers anymore. 30% of users say they use it more for more than just video games. It's only become more popular since the COVID-19 pandemic, ballooning to over 100 million active users. The demographics of Discord users skews young, as 41% of users are 16 to 24 years old, and millions of minors are actively using Discord every single day. Discord works a lot like messaging platforms such as Slack or Microsoft Teams. Users can create servers that are essentially private rooms for chatting about shared interests. And within those servers, individual channels can be created and customized. Discord does not actively moderate the 6.7 million servers that it hosts, and instead relies on user reports, user moderation, third-party bots, and scanning software that supposedly combs images for signs of illegal material. Despite these tools and Discord's policies against child sexual abuse material and the dissemination of non-consensually shared pornography, Discord is still rife with hardcore pornography, servers dedicated to trading non-consensually shared pornographic material, and the predatory grooming of children. Discord allows not suitable for work or NSFW content, as long as it's tagged as such, which again relies on users to moderate themselves, but it also creates a target for people to find this material. There are 31,000 servers on Discord that are tagged as containing NSFW content, some proudly proclaiming to leak intimate images illegally obtained from other sites such as OnlyFans, who you heard about shortly, just a minute ago. Invite links to these pornography servers are scattered across the internet and easily accessible. Grooming is also well documented as a problem on Discord. Adults can easily contact children in myriad ways through voice chat, server channels, and even private messaging. All it takes is a mutual server, and then these predators have unmitigated access to vulnerable and often unmonitored children. There is abundant evidence that Discord's current moderation and quote unquote safety policies are woefully insufficient for preventing, eradicating, or even detecting the massive amount of sexual abuse and exploitation that is happening across its platform. Now, to bring us home, here once again is Lena Nealon, our Director of Corporate and Strategic Initiatives, to explain how Google is leaving children vulnerable to exploitation via its Chromebooks.
For many families with school children, Chromebooks became almost synonymous with coronavirus. I know that was the case in our home, where 3 of our children are in public school and received Chromebooks. 40 million students and teachers were using these popular devices prior to the pandemic, and millions more Chromebooks were distributed as schools scrambled to move to online learning at the onset of COVID-19. And recent figures show that shipments of Chromebooks doubled in 2020. As one of the most powerful companies in the world, and one that is profiting from and greatly influencing the educational sector, Google must prioritize protecting kids on their devices. Unfortunately, we know from countless stories and personal testimony that we've received from families at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation that even before the pandemic, children had been harmed by exposure to sexually explicit content and even predators while using school-issued devices, either at home or at school. Parents and teachers often don't even realize that there's a problem until a student has shared pornography with another student, or they notice changes in their children. The Washington Post ran an article in December about 2 children that were exposed to countless amounts of pornography through their school-issued Chromebooks. And one of the parents wrote that their child showed a profound change in behavior in recent weeks: anxious, withdrawn, and frequently angry. He does not want to participate in virtual lessons or connect with friends. We also received an email recently from a mother in California who's homeschooling her children. And you saw the quote that she asks, she, as an involved parent, wasn't able to protect her daughter, who found loopholes through Chromebooks received through their homeschooling entity, and predators actually reached out to her daughter, and thankfully they were able to intervene. But these types of things should not be happening. Google's parent company, Alphabet, reached $1 trillion market cap in 2020. And again, Google profited enormously from the pandemic. But instead of proactively turning on safety features for Chromebooks going to schools, Google kept the burden on overwhelmed schools, families, and communities. We've been working with Google for years, and they've been telling us for years that they would consider doing something about Chromebooks. They need to do something now, urgently. While we acknowledge that these devices were critical in the past year, and that Google does provide system-wide measures for subscribers at a cost, and do provide safety measures for parents, IT departments and families are often confused by the many steps required to turn them on, let alone monitor them. I make the analogy that it's like giving someone a car but the seat belt, the brake, the windshield are all given separately. And it's like, good luck, try to figure this out and put in the safety features that you want. No, the devices should come with the safety features already installed. And I can, again, attest as a parent, it took hours for me to understand what safety features were already put in place, what I could possibly change or not. Sometimes schools lock down the devices so much that parents can't even make them safer. And again, with the pandemic, IT departments were completely overburdened, and I don't blame them, but it took a month for me to hear back from our IT department when I had some questions about how I could make the Chromebooks even safer. And there are endless threads on Reddit, for example, of IT administrators sharing frustrations and not understanding how to install safety features or if they're doing it correctly, just as there are countless Reddit threads and YouTube tutorials by kids, by teens, telling each other about how to find pornography and bypass loopholes that the IT departments may have missed. And that's the best case scenario of having IT departments. Countless schools don't have those resources or the funds to pay for Google's admin support or the staff to monitor activity. And we know that underfunded districts are often serving the most marginalized communities, comprised of families that don't have the luxury of hours and hours to try to figure out safety measures, or may not have the resources to buy additional filters for their children. And we know these populations are already at greater risk for exploitation, and thus Google is leaving them open to even further exploitation. We are asking Google to live up to its motto of do the right thing and proactively default all settings to the highest level of safety, ideally for all Chromebooks, but especially the ones going to schools. Please sign our petition to Google CEO and demand digital safety in schools. So you've heard, I hope that this has inspired you. You've heard everyone's calls to action. Again, this list and the activists it's galvanized has spurred on over 100 policy changes. It's inspired legislative action, and it's catalyzed cultural change. You have the power as consumers, as shareholders, as concerned citizens to make your voice heard. We've had several of these entities tell us that they consider one letter, one email from a customer equaling to about 1,000 customers. And oftentimes hearing from the public is enough for them to change their policies. At other times, it helps open doors for the National Center on Sexual Exploitation and our allies to go in and continue the relationships and put the pressure on also from the inside. And it gets the attention of policymakers who can pass legislation and regulations when corporations aren't regulating themselves. I do want to share one more victory. I remember going into hotels as a kid and sometimes seeing the hardcore pornography that was on demand. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation pressed on several major hotel chains. This is what in the first years of the Dirty Dozen list to stop on-demand pornography. And Hilton came to us and was saying, we are getting thousands of emails. Can you please stop? And we said, yeah, we'll stop when you stop allowing on-demand pornography. And they did, and even put out a statement saying that it wasn't in keeping with the vision and goals of their company. And what happened next? Hyatt, Marriott, Starwood, Intercontinental Hotels followed suit, and it set off a ripple of an industry standard. And a survivor came to us that had been trafficked in one of those hotels and told us that when sex buyers would purchase her, they would put the on-demand pornography and demand that she enact the violent and degrading acts that she saw. And when she learned of this initiative, she said, I was so thankful to know that someone out there cares for me. So please remember that these actions are really affecting millions of people. Before I move into Q&A, I invite Aubrey to share how you can take action. And this is just the beginning of sustained efforts. This is the launch event, but we encourage you to take action throughout the year and continue to be involved with NCOSE and specifically the Dirty Dozen list. Aubrey, tell us how we can take action.
Okay, so as Lena mentioned at the beginning, our website is dirtydozenlist.com. You can navigate here and all of the targets will be listed. They're each hyperlinked. You can, like Lena said earlier, view all the research that we've spent months putting together, all of the evidence that shows how these corporations are facilitating sexual abuse and exploitation. Very interesting information, and I recommend that you all go through that. But further down the actions, we have tweets that you can share, and embedded, we have quick actions you can do. Most of these emails will be sent to the executives of these companies and some sent to their general info, but we've made an easy form with an email with the recommendations you can edit and fill in just some brief information about yourself and press take action, and that email will be sent directly to those executives. Each action should take less than 1 minute. So it's really, really easy, and we provided a way for all 15 targets for you to make a difference.
Thank you, Aubrey. So I hope you heard that in about 15 to 30 minutes, you can take action on each one of these targets. And we really invite you to do so, and please invite your friends to do so as well. We're seeing some questions come in. I'd love for my colleagues to join me on screen. Great. So John, this is the first one for you. You included several digital platforms suspected of facilitating sex trafficking and child sex abuse material. With passage of the Earn It Act by Congress, a bipartisan bill introduced last year revoking big tech's immunity regarding child sex abuse material, help curb this criminal conduct?
Yes, most definitely. You know, we've been working for years to try to get these companies to change on their own. And they're making incremental steps forward because of the mounting pressure. But we have to hold them more accountable. We can't just rely on big tech to prioritize child safety or human dignity and create safe spaces. The Earn It Act would help solve a lot of these problems in a couple of different ways. It would end their immunity if they don't have kind of the basic standards, if they're not meeting the basic standards and they're knowingly allowing this kind of material to continue to grow. But also it creates basic standards in general for the tech community, so that, you know, there's going to be a new TikTok, there's going to be a new Snapchat, and we want to make sure that all of these new platforms that become popular and our, you know, future generations join, that they're safe also there. So the Earn It Act will definitely help with some of these problems. And we invite all of you to join with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation in calling on Congress to pass this bill. It already has overwhelming bipartisan support, which is so important at a time in our country where we're so divided. We all are on the same page for child safety.
Thank you, Dawn. And people can act, and we have, again, easy actions that everybody can take on endsexualexploitation.org. So not specifically with the Dirty Dozen list, but we always make easy actions, easy ways to contact legislators on all of these issues that we're fighting. I have a question here from Mark Pattison with the Catholic News Service. How many companies were considered for the Dirty Dozen list before you settled on these 12, plus the 3 for the watch list? Also, what Dirty Dozen companies from last year were able to get off the list? I can briefly answer, and I'd love my colleagues to also chime in. So We look at dozens of companies for the Dirty Dozen list. But again, this year, we were looking at entities that profited in a unique way because of the pandemic, and also that we really felt could have done a lot more. And again, particularly with kids and vulnerable populations. So we look at but the individual targets. We do look from the list from previous years to see, who has made significant effort, who has maybe unfortunately gotten even worse. We look at entities again that are known to the public. Again, that everyone has a Visa card in their pocket. We're using Amazon daily. So we want people to understand how these corporations that they're using and are, again, providing good services could do better. And that this, we encourage people as customers and the shareholders to put pressure on them. And then we look at the list, as a whole. We try to ensure that we have targets that are perhaps taking advantage or of different populations, and are also maybe the type of sexual abuse and exploitation, may be different. Some it's several, and others we maybe want to elevate. And then for example, OnlyFans and Seeking Arrangement, while they're not necessarily mainstream entities, that the general public is using, we just feel it's really important. They're mainstream with the younger generations, and so we really want to elevate these entities for everybody, just to know what's happening and to raise awareness about how youth are interacting with these corporations. And in terms of who we took off the list from last year, Haley and Don.
I would highlight two that actually got moved from the Dirty Dozen list to the watch list. So one of those is Visa, which it was put on the 2020 Dirty Dozen list because they processed payments for a number of pornography websites, including Pornhub. After this last year, the recent revelations of sex trafficking and child sexual abuse videos being rampant on Pornhub. In fact, just the other day, Pornhub executives had to testify before a Canadian Parliament committee about these crimes that have been going on their platform. Visa has now stopped processing payments with Pornhub, which is an incredible victory. It's really significant. They remain on the watch list because they're still processing payments for some of the subsidiaries of MindGeek, which is the owner of Pornhub. And they also process payments for Seeking Arrangement, OnlyFans, and even some brothels in Nevada. So that's why we've removed them from the Dirty Dozen list, because it's a really significant culture shifting step for them to cut ties with Pornhub, but there's still more that we hope that they will do. And then another similar entity would be TikTok, which is now on the watch list. It was on the Dirty Dozen list last year, but they made a really significant number of improvements, especially to their parental controls, which we were specifically asking them to do. And they've even updated some of their community content guidelines to be against things like normalizing sexual objectification or sexual exploitation of many different kinds. So we think that those are some really valuable improvements that we're excited, hope that they put it all into practice.
Michael Grabowski with the Christian Post. Question for the experts. Do you believe that the eventual end of the pandemic will influence the decisions of any of the businesses on the Dirty Dozen list to make their products better combat sexual exploitation? Jake, you want to take that one?
We certainly hope that it doesn't ever take a pandemic or the end of a pandemic for any of these corporations or entities to make their products safer for all users, and especially for children. I think what we've seen with the pandemic is an exacerbation of a problem that was already existing and exploding at exponential rates. I mean, we only have to look as far as the New York Times reporting that came out in 2018 about the exponential rise of child sexual abuse material online to see that even before the pandemic, we had a huge issue that these corporations and entities needed to deal with. So while we see the pandemic has exacerbated those issues, we think that these problems are not going away even when the pandemic ends. And So although we're using this opportunity to highlight how they've been worsened by what's happened over the last year and more people spending more time online, the reality is that most of us, and our children in particular, are living augmented reality lives in a sense. And that all of these forms of exploitation and the measures needed to combat them are needed right now.
I just want to share that as the pandemic was shutting down schools and kids were, finding themselves with much more time to be online, we reached out, we sat down with Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok, all three of them early on in the last year. And all three of them, we went to them to say, now, as kids are flocking to your platforms, predators are also flocking. And we know that child sexual abuse, predatory grooming, sex trafficking is going to start to explode. And so even though we'd been working with them for a while before the pandemic really started, they agreed to roll out some changes more urgently and more quickly than was scheduled. And so, for example, some of the progress that Haley mentioned with Snapchat, they made it a priority to roll it out because of the increased danger of kids on their platform. And we know that those changes are permanent. They're not going back to those relaxed backwards policies when this pandemic ends. And so I would just argue right now is the time when we need your voice. We really can move these companies to change. If Google does the right thing, what we've been asking them for a couple of years, and protects Chromebooks that are used for schools, next year when kids are back in school, they're not going to change their mind and no longer have protected Chromebooks. Like, these will be permanent changes. So join with us now, because this moment in time to really call on them to change will be fleeting. So I just wanted to explain that.
Thank you, Dawn. Another question, Stephanie. We had someone commented, because of my activism, I have become friends with some former so-called sex workers, and a lot of them tend to think that sex work should be legalized and heavily regulated to prevent abuse. I know this is a controversy with regard to the brothels in Nevada. And Stephanie, I'll also add, just also with OnlyFans and seeking arrangement. Can you talk about this push and that argument that legalizing and regulating will make the commercial sex trade somehow safer?
Wow, okay. I only have a couple of minutes, so I'll try and kind of to narrow it down. But I'll tell you, the one thing that comes to mind is that, there is this feeling of, I call it false empowerment in terms of those involved in the sex trade. Because if you even go on our website and look at the research that Nkosi has done and the detrimental effects to those that are involved in this type of work psychologically, and not to mention those that have put themselves out there in the internet and decide to do something else, it's out there. Once it gets out there, you can't get it back. And so there are a lot of consequences that I think that people that are in the moment don't really see it. And unfortunately, they won't see it till later. And it's at that point that they can't do anything about it. So I really encourage you to go to our website, look at the research that is done, and look at some of the damages that it causes psychologically, emotionally, not to mention those that end up getting caught up in human trafficking that die as a result of that. And as it pertains to the brothels, we recently went out to Nevada and talked to some young women that have been in the brothels. I am ex-LAPD, and I am also the former executive director of Journey Out, in which we did direct services. And in listening to these young ladies that were under a legal system, their hurt and their pain and their conversation was no different than those that I was working with under an illegal system. And so I think we need to remember that. And in those countries where it is legal, It's the same conversation about the harm that it causes. So I will leave it with that.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone. We are at time, but please join us in pressing these corporations, not just today, but throughout the year. Sign up for our lists. We will be sure to keep you updated on any changes that I'm sure will be coming soon on policy changes that these entities have made. So visit dirtydozenlist.com, read more, review the targets, look at the proof we've collected, and please take at least one action. But we invite you to take them all, and invite your friends to review, to act, and to get more resources and tools to foster a world free of sexual abuse and exploitation, and one that is moving towards dignity. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.